In the years following the Second World War, the United States found itself in an unfamiliar position. It was no longer simply one nation among many. It had become a superpower, locked in a quiet, anxious standoff with the Soviet Union. The Cold War had begun, and with it came a particular kind of fear, not of armies marching across borders, but of something more subtle, something happening inside the mind. American intelligence officials had watched the Moscow show trials of the 1930s with growing unease. They had seen loyal Communist Party members stand before judges and confess to crimes they could not possibly have committed. They had watched prisoners denounce themselves with what appeared to be complete sincerity, and they had asked a troubling question: how? What techniques could make a person betray their own beliefs, their own memories, their own sense of self? This question would lead the Central Intelligence Agency down a path that lasted more than 2 decades. A path involving hundreds of secret experiments, thousands of unwitting subjects, and methods that would eventually shock the American public when they finally came to light. The program had many names over the years, but the one that history remembers is MK Ultra. Tonight, we will explore this chapter of American history, not with sensationalism, but with care. We will examine how it began, what it involved, and what it ultimately revealed about the relationship between a government and its people. To understand MK Ultra, we must first understand the world that created it. The late 1940s were a time of profound uncertainty for American intelligence services. The Wartime Office of Strategic Services had been disbanded, and the newly formed Central Intelligence Agency was still finding its footing. Its officers were learning, often through painful experience, how to operate in peacetime, if the Cold War could be called peace at all. Then came Korea. When American prisoners of war began returning home in 1953, some of them carried stories that deeply disturbed their debriefers. A small number of servicemen had made statements denouncing the United States. A few had even chosen to remain in China rather than return home. The American press called it brainwashing, a term borrowed from the Chinese phrase "shi nao," meaning to wash the brain. The idea captured the public imagination immediately. Pause. In reality, the techniques used on American prisoners were not supernatural. They involved isolation, sleep deprivation, repetitive questioning, and the exploitation of physical weakness. These methods were harsh, certainly, but they were not the science fiction mind control that many Americans feared. The prisoners who cooperated had done so under extreme duress, not because their minds had been fundamentally altered, but this nuance was lost in the anxiety of the moment. American intelligence officials became convinced that the communist powers had developed techniques for controlling human behavior, techniques that the United States did not possess and could not defend against. Whether this belief was justified or not, it drove what came next. Allen Dulles became Director of Central Intelligence in 1953. He was a patrician figure, a former Wall Street lawyer with a pipe-smoking, professorial manner that concealed a willingness to pursue aggressive covert operations. Dulles believed that the United States was engaged in a struggle for survival, and that unconventional methods were not merely acceptable, but necessary. Under his leadership, the CIA would expand its activities dramatically, including its research into what agency documents called special interrogation techniques. The agency did not conduct this research alone. From the beginning, MK Ultra was designed to operate through intermediaries. The CIA established relationships with dozens of universities, hospitals, pharmaceutical companies, and private research foundations. In many cases, the researchers involved did not know they were working for the intelligence community. They believed they were receiving grants from philanthropic organizations with names like the Society for the Investigation of Human Ecology or the Geschichte Fund for Medical Research. These were front organizations created specifically to hide the CIA's involvement. This arrangement served multiple purposes. It provided plausible deniability. It allowed the agency to tap into expertise that did not exist within its own ranks. And it insulated the research from the normal oversight mechanisms that governed government activities. The scientists who participated were often distinguished figures in their fields. Some knew exactly who was funding their work. Others preferred not to ask questions. On April 13, 1953, Alan Dulles formally approved MKUltra. The program would eventually encompass 149 separate sub-projects conducted at 80 institutions across the United States and Canada. Its budget would run into the millions of dollars, though the exact figures remain difficult to determine, since many financial records were deliberately destroyed. The stated goal was to investigate and develop chemical, biological, and psychological techniques for use in intelligence operations. In practice, this meant exploring the outer boundaries of human consciousness. And the researchers began with a substance that had only recently come to the attention of Western science. Lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD, had been synthesized in 1938 by a Swiss chemist named Albert Hofmann, working for the Sandoz Pharmaceutical Company in Basel. But its remarkable psychological effects were not discovered until 5 years later, when Hofmann accidentally absorbed a small amount through his skin. The experience that followed was unlike anything in the medical literature. Hofmann reported vivid visual distortions, a profound alteration of time perception, and a sense that the boundaries of his self were dissolving. For the CIA, LSD seemed to offer extraordinary possibilities. Could it be used to make enemy agents reveal secrets they had been trained to protect? Could it disorient soldiers on a battlefield? Could it perhaps be slipped into the water supply of an enemy city? These questions may sound almost naive today, but in the early 1950s, with the Cold War entering its most intense phase, they were taken with complete seriousness by intelligent, educated people who believed their country faced an existential threat. Pause. The experiments began quietly. Early studies were conducted on agency employees who volunteered to take the substance in controlled settings. The results were fascinating but inconclusive. LSD produced powerful psychological effects, certainly, but it did not seem to create the reliable, predictable changes in behavior that the agency was seeking. A person under the influence of LSD was just as likely to become suspicious and uncooperative as they were to become pliable and confiding. This should have been cause for reconsideration. Instead, the program expanded, and it began to move in troubling directions. In San Francisco and New York, the CIA established what it called safe houses, ordinary-looking apartments that were anything but ordinary. Under a sub-project codenamed Operation Midnight Climax, agency officers recruited women to bring men back to these locations. Without their knowledge or consent, the men would be given LSD. Agency personnel would observe from behind one-way mirrors, documenting the effects. The subjects never learned that they had been drugged. They never learned that their behavior was being watched and recorded. The man who supervised these operations was a CIA officer named George Hunter White. White was a former narcotics agent with a reputation for unconventional methods and a fondness for alcohol. In letters to his superiors, he described the work with evident enthusiasm. "Where else," he once wrote, "could a red-blooded American boy lie, kill, cheat, steal, and rape with the sanction of the All-Highest?" The sentence was meant as dark humor, but it revealed something about the culture that had developed around these programs. Meanwhile, some of the most troubling experiments were taking place not in the United States, but in Canada. At McGill University in Montreal, a psychiatrist named Ewan Cameron was conducting research that went far beyond anything the CIA had originally contemplated. Cameron was seeking to develop a technique he called psychic driving, a method for erasing a patient's existing mental patterns and replacing them with new ones. His subjects were psychiatric patients who had come to the Allen Memorial Institute seeking treatment for conditions like anxiety and depression. Instead, they received massive doses of LSD, sometimes for weeks at a time. They were subjected to extended periods of drug-induced sleep, sometimes lasting months. They were placed in sensory deprivation chambers, and they were forced to listen to recorded messages played on continuous loops. The same phrases repeated tens of thousands of times. The results were devastating. Rather than achieving the targeted personality changes Cameron sought, his patients experienced severe psychological damage. Many lost years of their memories. Some lost the ability to care for themselves. They had to relearn basic skills like reading and recognizing family members. When they finally left the hospital, they were not cured. They were broken. The CIA provided funding for Cameron's work through one of its front organizations. How much the agency knew about his specific methods remains a matter of historical debate. Some documents suggest that agency officials had concerns about Cameron's techniques. Others indicate that they continued to fund his work even after receiving disturbing reports about its effects. What is not in dispute is that the agency's system of hidden funding and minimal oversight made such abuses possible. Pause. LSD was not the only focus of MKUltra research. Over the years, the program explored an extraordinary range of techniques. Researchers studied hypnosis, electroshock therapy, and sensory deprivation. They investigated the effects of barbiturates, amphetamines, and heroin. They examined whether it was possible to plant false memories or create amnesia through psychological manipulation. Some sub-projects explored even more exotic possibilities: radiation, ultrasonic frequencies, and the potential intelligence applications of parapsychology. Most of these investigations produced little of practical value. The search for a reliable truth serum proved fruitless. There is no drug that compels honesty without also impairing the subject's ability to think clearly. The attempts to develop techniques for controlling behavior or erasing memories were similarly unsuccessful. The human mind proved far more resilient, far more complex than the researchers had anticipated. By the mid-1960s, MKUltra was winding down. The initial urgency had faded. The promised breakthroughs had not materialized, and a new generation of CIA leadership had begun to question whether the program's methods were justifiable, regardless of their results. In 1963, the agency's own Inspector General conducted an internal review and raised serious concerns about the ethical and legal implications of experiments on unwitting subjects. Gradually, the most troubling research was discontinued, but the story was far from over. The true reckoning was still a decade away. The exposure of MKUltra came about through a chain of events that no one could have predicted. In 1973, amid the growing chaos of Watergate, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered the destruction of all files related to the program. He was concerned about what might happen if the documents fell into hostile hands, whether those hands belonged to congressional investigators or foreign intelligence services. Most of the records were indeed destroyed, but not all of them. Some MKUltra documents had been misfiled. They were stored not with the operational records, but with the agency's financial files. When investigators went looking years later, they found approximately 20,000 pages that had survived the destruction order. It was through these documents that the program's scope began to become clear. The revelations came in stages. In December 1974, journalist Seymour Hersh published a front-page story in the New York Times revealing that the CIA had conducted illegal surveillance operations against American citizens during the Vietnam War era. The article mentioned, almost in passing, that the agency had also conducted drug experiments. This reference caught the attention of congressional investigators who were already examining intelligence community abuses. What followed was an unprecedented period of scrutiny. In 1975, President Gerald Ford appointed a commission, chaired by Vice President Nelson Rockefeller, to investigate CIA activities within the United States. That same year, the Senate established the Church Committee, named for its chairman, Senator Frank Church of Idaho. The House created its own investigative body, the Pike Committee. For the first time, the American intelligence community was being examined in public view. The most detailed public examination of MKUltra came in August 1977, when the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence held hearings specifically focused on the program. The testimony was sobering. Former subjects described experiences of confusion, terror, and lasting psychological damage. CIA officials acknowledged that the experiments had been conducted without proper consent and that their methods would not meet any reasonable ethical standard. Admiral Stansfield Turner, who had become CIA director earlier that year, testified about the program's scope and acknowledged its failures of judgment. He emphasized that such activities would not be repeated. The agency, he said, had learned from its mistakes. Whether this assurance was sufficient remained a matter of considerable debate. For the American public, the revelations were deeply disturbing. Here was evidence that their own government had conducted experiments on citizens without their knowledge or consent, that it had drugged, deceived, and in some cases permanently harmed people who had done nothing wrong, that it had done these things not during some ancient era of lesser values, but within living memory, in cities across the country. Pause. The victims of MKUltra faced enormous obstacles in seeking justice. Most could not prove what had been done to them. The destruction of records meant that documentation was sparse. The passage of time made memories unreliable. Many subjects did not even know they had been experimented upon until years after the fact. The government invoked national security concerns to limit disclosure. Some lawsuits were filed. A few were successful. In 1988, the Canadian government agreed to pay compensation to patients who had been subjected to Cameron's experiments at the Allen Memorial Institute. The amount was modest, far less than what the victims had suffered. Similar efforts in the United States produced mixed results. The legal landscape was complicated by issues of sovereign immunity, statutes of limitations, and the difficulty of proving causation decades after the events in question. What are we to make of MKUltra today, more than 70 years after it began and 50 years after its exposure? The program is sometimes discussed as though it were an aberration, a strange chapter in American history that could not happen again. This interpretation is comforting. It may also be incomplete. The conditions that made MKUltra possible have not entirely disappeared. The belief that national security can justify extreme measures remains widespread. The desire to develop new interrogation and influence techniques continues. The structures of secrecy that shielded the program from oversight still exist, though with more safeguards than before. The tension between security and ethics is not a problem that any democracy solves once and for all. It is a challenge that must be addressed in every generation. The legacy of MKUltra can be found in many places. It contributed to the development of modern research ethics, the strict requirements for informed consent that now govern human experimentation. It prompted new oversight mechanisms for intelligence activities, including the creation of permanent intelligence committees in Congress. It reinforced the principle that even in times of perceived crisis, there are limits to what a democratic government may do to its own people. Perhaps most importantly, It serves as a reminder of what can happen when fear overcomes judgment. The officials who authorized MK Ultra were not monsters. They were intelligent, educated people who believed they were protecting their country. They convinced themselves that the ends justified the means. And in doing so, they caused immeasurable harm to innocent people who never consented to participate in their experiments. As you rest tonight, consider this. The story of MK Ultra is not simply a tale of past wrongdoing. It is a story about the choices that societies make when they feel threatened, about the importance of transparency, accountability, and the rule of law, about the need for citizens to remain vigilant, even when, perhaps especially when, their leaders insist that secrecy is necessary for their protection. The program ended long ago. Its victims, those who are still living, have grown old, but the questions it raises remain as relevant as ever. Pause. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. Until next time, rest well, and may your dreams be peaceful. In the years following the Second World War, the world was rebuilding. Families were starting over, industries were recovering, and medicine, perhaps more than any other field, was entering what many believed to be a golden age. Antibiotics had transformed the treatment of infection. Vaccines were conquering diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. And in laboratories across Europe and North America, pharmaceutical companies were racing to develop new compounds that would ease the burdens of modern life. It was an era of extraordinary optimism. People trusted science, they trusted their doctors, and they trusted the medications they were prescribed. This is the story of thalidomide. It is a story about a small white pill that was meant to help people sleep. It is a story about what happens when ambition outpaces caution, when marketing moves faster than medicine, and when the systems meant to protect us fail in ways no one anticipated. It is also, ultimately, a story about change, about the regulations that were born from tragedy, and about the people whose lives were forever altered by a drug that should never have reached the market in the form it did. Tonight, we will trace the history of thalidomide from its origins in post-war Germany to its worldwide distribution, its devastating consequences, and the lasting reforms it inspired. To understand thalidomide, we must first understand the world that created it. Germany in the 1950s was a nation in recovery. The war had ended a decade earlier, but the country was still rebuilding its infrastructure, its economy, and its sense of identity. In this environment, the pharmaceutical industry represented something hopeful. It was modern, it was scientific. It was a sign that Germany could once again contribute something valuable to the world. One of the companies at the forefront of this recovery was Chemie Grünenthal. Founded in 1946 in the town of Stolberg, near Aachen, the company had begun as a modest operation. Its early products included simple disinfectants and cough medicines, but its ambitions were larger. By the mid-1950s, Grünenthal employed a team of researchers tasked with developing new pharmaceutical compounds. Among them was a chemist named Wilhelm Kunz. In 1953, Kunz synthesized a new molecule as part of the company's efforts to develop antibiotics. The compound was called alpha-thalidomide. It would later become known as thalidomide. Initial tests suggested that the compound had no antibiotic properties, but researchers noticed something else. When given to laboratory animals, the substance appeared to have a sedative effect. It seemed to calm them. In an era when sleep medications were in high demand, this observation caught the attention of Grünenthal's leadership. The market for sedatives in the 1950s was substantial. People were anxious. The pace of life was accelerating, and the most common sleep medications of the era, barbiturates, carried significant risks. They were effective, but they were also dangerous. Overdoses were common. Addiction was a real concern. Doctors and patients alike were searching for something safer. Thalidomide appeared to offer exactly that. In early testing, researchers found it remarkably difficult to establish a lethal dose in animals. Unlike barbiturates, which could easily prove fatal if taken in excess, thalidomide seemed almost impossibly safe. Test animals survived even massive doses. This apparent safety margin would become one of the drug's primary selling points. Grunenthal moved quickly. By October of 1957, just 4 years after its initial synthesis, thalidomide was introduced to the German market under the brand name Contergan. The company marketed it aggressively, promoting it not only to doctors but directly to consumers through advertisements in newspapers and magazines. The messaging was consistent and confident. Here was a sleeping pill that was gentle. Here was a sedative that was safe. Grunenthal claimed that Contergan was so harmless it could be given to anyone, including pregnant women and children. Some advertisements even suggested it was suitable for nursing mothers. These claims were not based on rigorous clinical testing by modern standards. The regulatory framework of the 1950s was vastly different from what we know today. In many countries, pharmaceutical companies were largely responsible for their own safety assessments. There was no requirement for extensive trials. There was no mandate to demonstrate safety in specific populations, such as pregnant women. Grunenthal wasted no time in expanding beyond Germany. The company licensed thalidomide to pharmaceutical firms around the world. In the United Kingdom, it was sold under the name Distaval. In Canada, it was known as Kevadon. In Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and across Europe, the drug appeared under dozens of different brand names. By 1960, thalidomide was available in more than 40 countries. It had become one of the best-selling sedatives in the world. Millions of people were taking it to help them sleep, to calm their nerves, to ease the discomforts of daily life. And increasingly, it was being prescribed to pregnant women. Part 2. The core of the story. For pregnant women in the late 1950s and early 1960s, thalidomide seemed like an answer to prayer. Morning sickness was one of the most common discomforts of early pregnancy, and there were few effective treatments. Thalidomide helped. It calmed nausea. It allowed women to sleep through the nights when they might otherwise have been restless and uncomfortable. Doctors prescribed it freely. The drug was available over the counter in some countries. Women shared it with friends and family members who were also expecting. It was, by all appearances, exactly what the manufacturer claimed: a safe, gentle medication with no serious side effects. But something was happening, something that would not become clear for several years. In delivery rooms across Europe, Australia, and beyond, doctors were beginning to notice unusual births. Babies were being born with severe limb abnormalities. Some had shortened arms or legs. Some had hands or feet attached directly to their torsos, a condition known as phocomelia. Some had no limbs at all. The numbers were small at first. Individual cases scattered across different hospitals in different countries. Phocomelia had always existed, but it was extraordinarily rare. Now, doctors were seeing cases with increasing frequency. In some hospitals, clusters appeared. Several affected babies born within weeks or months of each other. In Hamburg, Germany, a pediatrician named Widukind Lenz began to investigate. Lenz had seen several cases of phocomelia in his practice, and he was troubled by their apparent increase. He began interviewing the mothers of affected children, asking detailed questions about their pregnancies. What had they eaten? Where had they lived? Had they been exposed to radiation? Had they taken any medications? A pattern emerged. Again and again, the mothers mentioned the same thing. They had taken a sleeping pill. They had taken Contergan. Lenz was cautious. He was a careful scientist, and he knew that correlation did not prove causation. but the pattern was too consistent to ignore. In November of 1961, he contacted Chemie Grunenthal directly. He told them of his concerns. He urged them to consider withdrawing the drug from the market. The company's initial response was defensive. They questioned Lenz's methodology. They pointed to the apparent safety of the drug in animal testing. They suggested that other factors might be responsible, but Lenz was not alone in his observations. In Australia, an obstetrician named William McBride had reached similar conclusions independently. McBride had noticed an increase in limb abnormalities among babies delivered at his hospital in Sydney. Like Lenz, he had traced the pattern back to thalidomide, which was sold in Australia under the name Distaval. McBride wrote a letter to the prestigious British medical journal, The Lancet. It was published on December 16, 1961. In just a few paragraphs, he described the cases he had observed and raised the possibility that thalidomide might be responsible. It was a measured, cautious communication, but its implications were profound. The letter in The Lancet was like a match to dry kindling. Within days, newspapers around the world were reporting on the possible connection between thalidomide and birth defects. Grunenthal withdrew Contagon from the German market on November 27, 1961, just weeks after Lenz had first contacted them. Other countries followed. The drug was pulled from shelves in Britain, Australia, Canada, and elsewhere. But the damage was already done. Thousands of women had taken thalidomide during the critical early weeks of pregnancy, often before they even knew they were expecting. The drug's effects on fetal development were most severe when taken between the 20th and 36th days after conception, a window when many women were not yet aware of their pregnancies. The scope of the tragedy became clearer in the months that followed. Estimates vary, but it is believed that thalidomide caused birth defects in more than 10,000 children worldwide. Many more pregnancies ended in miscarriage or stillbirth. The affected children faced a lifetime of physical challenges. Many also experienced internal abnormalities affecting the heart, kidneys, ears, and eyes. The children who survived were remarkable. They adapted. They learned to use their bodies in ways that defied expectation. They built lives and careers and families, but their existence was a constant reminder of what had gone wrong. There was one notable exception to the global distribution of thalidomide. In the United States, the drug was never approved for general sale. This was not due to any particular foresight on the part of American regulators. It was due to one person's persistence. Francis Oldham Kelsey was a pharmacologist and physician working as a reviewer for the Food and Drug Administration. In 1960, she was assigned to evaluate the application from the William S. Merrill Company to market thalidomide in the United States under the name Kevadon. Kelsey was unimpressed by the application. The safety data was thin. The clinical evidence was largely anecdotal, and she had concerns about reports from Europe suggesting that thalidomide might cause peripheral neuritis, a type of nerve damage affecting the hands and feet. She requested more information. She asked for additional studies. The pharmaceutical company pushed back. They pressured her. They complained to her superiors. They accused her of being unreasonable, of blocking a safe and effective medication for bureaucratic reasons. But Kelsey held firm. She refused to approve the drug until her questions were answered. Her stubbornness saved countless American families from tragedy. By the time the connection between thalidomide and birth defects was established, the drug had never reached American pharmacies. Kelsey became a national hero. In 1962, President John F. Kennedy presented her with the President's Award for Distinguished Federal Civilian Service. But her story was more than a personal triumph. It was a catalyst for change. The thalidomide disaster exposed the inadequacy of pharmaceutical regulation, not just in the United States, but around the world. Part 3. Aftermath and Change. The withdrawal of thalidomide from the market did not end its story. In many ways, the most important chapter was just beginning. The years that followed would see investigations, lawsuits, reforms, and a fundamental rethinking of how medications reach the public. In Germany, the criminal trial against Grunenthal executives began in 1968. It was one of the longest criminal proceedings in German history, lasting nearly 3 years. The prosecution argued that the company had been aware of problems with thalidomide and had failed to act. Defense attorneys countered that the scientific understanding of the time made it impossible to anticipate the drug's effects on fetal development. The trial ended without a definitive verdict. In 1970, Grunenthal agreed to pay compensation to affected families in exchange for the charges being dropped. The settlement established a fund of 100 million German marks. It was, at the time, one of the largest pharmaceutical settlements in history. Similar legal actions proceeded in other countries. In Britain, the Distillers Company, which had manufactured and distributed thalidomide there, faced lawsuits from affected families. The legal battles were protracted and contentious. Many families struggled for years to receive compensation. Some waited decades. The human cost was immeasurable. But out of tragedy came reform. In the United States, the thalidomide disaster provided the impetus for the Kefauver-Harris Amendment, signed into law by President Kennedy in October of 1962. The new regulations transformed pharmaceutical oversight. For the first time, drug manufacturers were required to prove not only that their products were safe, but that they were effective for their intended use. The amendment mandated rigorous clinical trials. It required informed consent from participants in medical studies. It established the framework of pharmaceutical regulation that remains in place today. Other countries followed suit. Britain established the Committee on Safety of Drugs in 1963, which later became the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. The European Union developed harmonized standards for pharmaceutical approval. The World Health Organization created guidelines for drug safety monitoring. These changes did not eliminate pharmaceutical tragedies. No system is perfect, but they created barriers. They established procedures. They ensured that the burden of proof rested with manufacturers, not with the public. There is a final chapter to the thalidomide story, one that few people expected. In the decades following its withdrawal, researchers continued to study the drug. They discovered that thalidomide, despite its devastating effects on fetal development, had properties that made it useful for treating certain conditions. In 1998, the FDA approved thalidomide for the treatment of erythema nodosum leprosum, a painful complication of leprosy. Later, it was found to be effective against multiple myeloma, a cancer of the blood. Today, thalidomide and related compounds are used under extremely strict controls. Prescriptions are tightly regulated. Patients must agree to contraception and regular pregnancy testing. It is a strange outcome. A drug that caused so much harm has found a second life as a treatment for serious illness. But the controls surrounding its use reflect the lessons learned. Nothing is prescribed casually. Nothing is assumed to be safe without evidence. The children affected by thalidomide are no longer children. Those who survived are now in their 60s. They have lived full lives. They have become advocates, educators, and activists. Many have spent decades fighting for recognition, compensation, and support. Their voices have mattered. In 2012, the German government issued a formal apology to thalidomide survivors. Grunenthal's chief executive offered an apology the same year, more than 50 years after the drug was withdrawn. For many survivors, these acknowledgements came too late. But they came. The legacy of thalidomide extends beyond regulation. It changed how we think about medicine, about trust, about responsibility. It demonstrated that good intentions are not enough, that safety must be proven, not assumed, that the most vulnerable among us, including those not yet born, deserve protection. Tonight, as you rest, consider what changed because of thalidomide. Consider the clinical trials that now protect patients. Consider the informed consent forms that ensure people understand what they are taking. Consider the regulatory agencies that scrutinize every new medication before it reaches the public. These systems are imperfect. They are slow. They are sometimes frustrating. But they exist because of what happened when they did not. The story of thalidomide is not simply a tragedy. It is a lesson. It is a reminder that progress requires caution, that innovation must be balanced with responsibility, and that the true measure of a society is how it protects those who cannot protect themselves. Rest well tonight, and when you wake, carry with you this truth, that even from the deepest sorrows, change can emerge, that the past can teach us, and that the lessons we learn, if we remember them, can prevent the same mistakes from being made again. In the early 20th century, in small industrial towns across the northeastern United States, a new element captured the imagination of an entire nation: radium. Discovered by Marie and Pierre Curie in 1898, this substance seemed almost miraculous. It glowed in the dark. It appeared to possess limitless energy. And for a brief, hopeful period, many believed it held the power to cure disease, restore vitality, and transform ordinary objects into something wondrous. This is the story of the young women who worked with radium every day, who painted it onto watch dials with delicate brushes, who were told it was harmless, even beneficial, and who, through their suffering and their courage, would eventually change the course of labor law in America and help establish the field of occupational health as we know it today. Their story is not one of villains and heroes in the traditional sense. It is something more complicated and perhaps more important. It is a story about trust, about science, about the slow and sometimes painful way that truth emerges when powerful interests would prefer it remain hidden. Tonight, we travel back more than a century to understand who these women were, what they experienced, and why their legacy endures. To understand the world these young women entered, we must first understand the extraordinary reputation that radium had acquired in the years following its discovery. When Marie Curie isolated radium from pitchblende ore in her modest Paris laboratory, she unveiled something that seemed to defy the known laws of nature. Here was an element that emitted light and heat continuously, without any apparent fuel source. It glowed with a soft blue-green luminescence that required no flame, no electricity, no external power. The scientific community was captivated, the public was enchanted, and entrepreneurs saw opportunity. Within just a few years of its discovery, radium found its way into an astonishing array of consumer products. There were radium-infused waters marketed as health tonics. Radium face creams promised to restore youthful skin. Radium suppositories claimed to revitalize male vigor. Radium chocolate, radium toothpaste, radium wool for babies. The element's very name became synonymous with energy, modernity, and scientific progress. This was not deception born of malice, at least not initially. In the early 1900s, the dangers of radiation exposure were simply not understood. Radioactivity was a new phenomenon. The instruments to measure it were primitive. The long-term health effects had not yet manifested in ways that scientists could observe and document. It was in this atmosphere of optimism and scientific wonder that the United States Radium Corporation established its factory in Orange, New Jersey, in 1917. The timing was deliberate. America had just entered the First World War, and the military had an urgent need for luminous instrument dials. Watches, compasses, aircraft gauges, anything that soldiers and sailors needed to read in darkness required illumination. And radium paint provided exactly that. The company hired young women from the surrounding communities. Most were teenagers or in their early 20s. Many came from immigrant families, working-class backgrounds, hoping to contribute to the war effort while earning good wages. And the wages were remarkably good. A skilled dial painter could earn nearly 3 times what a typical factory worker made. The job was considered prestigious, even glamorous. The work itself was delicate and demanding. Each dial required the painter to carefully apply radium-based paint to the tiny numerals and hands. The brushes were fine-tipped, often made from camel hair, capable of the precision work needed for these miniature surfaces. But maintaining that fine point required a technique. The women were taught to shape their brushes by placing them between their lips. Lip, dip, paint, lip, dip, paint. This technique, repeated hundreds of times each day, ensured clean lines and efficient work. The supervisors encouraged it, the company approved it, and the women, trusting their employers, followed the instructions without question. They had no reason to doubt. The radium paint smelled faintly sweet. The supervisors assured them it was harmless. Some women even painted their nails with it, their teeth, their faces, delighting in the way they glowed when the lights went out. On their way home after night shifts, they would sometimes appear luminescent, their hair and skin shimmering with traces of radium dust. These young women became known in their communities. They were the girls who glowed. It seemed magical, harmless, even beautiful. They were contributing to the war effort, earning good money, and working in conditions far more pleasant than many factory jobs of the era. The dial painting studios were clean, well lit, respectable places for young women to work. By the war's end in 1918, the demand for military instruments had decreased, but civilian demand for luminous watches and clocks was just beginning. The company continued to hire, continued to train, continued to instruct its workers in the lip-pointing technique. And the women continued to work, unaware that with each brushstroke, with each touch of the brush to their lips, they were absorbing small but accumulating quantities of radium into their bodies. Among the hundreds of women who worked as dial painters during these years, several would eventually become central figures in the legal battles to come. Grace Fryer began working at the Orange Factory in 1917, when she was just 18 years old. She was bright, capable, and well-liked by her colleagues. For 5 years, she painted dials, following every instruction her supervisors gave her, taking pride in her careful work. In the early 1920s, something began to change. Fryer noticed that her health was declining in ways she could not explain. Her teeth became loose. Her jaw ached constantly. She felt exhausted even after rest. When she visited doctors, they were puzzled. Her symptoms did not match any common illness they knew. She was not alone. Across Orange and the neighboring town of Newark, other former dial painters were experiencing similar problems. Amelia Maggia, who had worked alongside Fryer, developed a severe and painful condition in her jaw. Her dentist extracted tooth after tooth, but the pain only worsened. The bone itself seemed to be deteriorating, crumbling away in pieces. When Maggia died in September 1922, at the age of 24, her death certificate listed syphilis as the cause. This was not an accurate diagnosis based on evidence. It was a convenient explanation, one that diverted attention from any industrial cause and cast doubt on the young woman's moral character. It would take years before the true cause of her death was acknowledged. The symptoms continued to spread among former dial painters. Teeth fell out without warning. Jaws developed abscesses that would not heal. Bones fractured from minor movements. Women who had been healthy and vigorous in their youth found themselves unable to walk, unable to care for themselves, experiencing pain that defied description. Doctors who examined these women were initially baffled. The patterns did not match known diseases, but a few physicians began to notice the common thread. These patients had all worked as dial painters. They had all been exposed to radium. Dr. Harrison Martland, the medical examiner for Essex County, New Jersey, took a particular interest in these cases. He was methodical, persistent, and willing to challenge the company's assurances that radium was harmless. Through careful examination and testing, Martland began to document what he called radium necrosis, the destruction of bone tissue caused by radiation exposure. Martland's investigations revealed something troubling. When he tested the bodies of deceased dial painters, he found that their bones were radioactive. The radium they had ingested years earlier had been absorbed into their skeletal systems, where it continued to emit radiation from within. Their bodies had become sources of radiation, and that radiation was destroying them from the inside. The United States Radium Corporation responded to these findings with denial and deflection. Company officials insisted that radium was safe in small quantities. They pointed to the absence of definitive scientific consensus. They suggested that the women's illnesses might have other causes. Some company representatives went so far as to claim that dial painting actually improved the women's health, that the radium gave them rosy cheeks and vital energy. Meanwhile, the company had quietly implemented new safety protocols in its factories. Workers were now given protective equipment. The lip-pointing technique was discontinued. Lead screens were installed between workers and radium supplies. These changes suggested that company officials understood the dangers, even as they publicly denied them. The press began to take notice. Local newspapers published stories about the sick dial painters, raising questions about industrial safety and corporate responsibility. But the company's lawyers were effective at managing the narrative. They emphasized scientific uncertainty. They questioned the credibility of the victims. They delayed and obstructed at every turn. Grace Fryer, despite her declining health, decided to take action. In 1925, she began searching for a lawyer who would take her case against the United States Radium Corporation. It was not easy. Attorney after attorney declined. Some feared the company's power and resources. Others doubted that a case based on such novel scientific claims could succeed. For 2 years, Fryer searched. Finally, in 1927, she found representation, and she was not alone. 4 other dial painters joined her lawsuit: Catherine Schaub, Quinta MacDonald, Albina Larice, and Edna Hussman. Together, these 5 women became known in the press as the Radium Girls. The lawsuit filed by Grace Fryer and her 4 colleagues drew national attention. Here were 5 young women, visibly ill, some barely able to walk, taking on one of the most powerful industrial corporations in America. The contrast was stark and unavoidable. The press followed every development. The legal proceedings were complicated and drawn out. The company employed various delay tactics, arguing procedural points, questioning jurisdiction, challenging evidence. Each delay was agonizing for the plaintiffs, whose health was deteriorating week by week. Some observers wondered whether the company was simply waiting for the women to die before any judgment could be rendered. The scientific evidence presented during the proceedings was groundbreaking. Dr. Martland testified about his findings. Other medical experts confirmed the connection between radium exposure and the symptoms the women were experiencing. For perhaps the first time in American legal history, a case was being built on the concept of occupational radiation exposure. The women themselves testified when they were able. Grace Fryer described her years of work at the factory, the instructions she had followed, the assurances she had been given. She described watching her health decline, the pain she experienced, the life she had once expected to live. Her testimony was measured and factual, all the more powerful for its restraint. In June 1928, before the case could go to trial, the company agreed to a settlement. Each of the 5 women would receive $10,000 in immediate compensation, plus an annual pension of $600 for as long as they lived, plus coverage of all medical and legal expenses. In today's terms, the immediate payments would be equivalent to roughly $170,000 each. It was not justice in the fullest sense. The company admitted no wrongdoing. The amounts, though significant, could not restore the health these women had lost, and for some, the pensions would not be paid for very long. Amelia Maggia, whose death had been falsely attributed to syphilis, was exhumed in 1927. When her remains were tested, they were found to be highly radioactive. Her jaw, which had disintegrated during her illness, showed clear evidence of radium poisoning. Her death certificate was never officially corrected, but the scientific findings spoke for themselves. The Radium Girls case had implications far beyond the individual plaintiffs. It established important legal precedents about employer responsibility for workplace conditions. It demonstrated that workers could hold corporations accountable for health effects that emerged years after exposure. It helped define what would eventually become the field of occupational health. In the years following the settlement, regulations governing the handling of radioactive materials were gradually strengthened. Workers in radium industries were provided with better protection. The lip-pointing technique was banned entirely. Companies were required to monitor their workers' health and maintain safer workplace conditions. The 5 women who filed the original lawsuit lived out their remaining years with varying degrees of suffering. Some survived for decades, carrying radioactive material in their bones throughout their lives. Others succumbed to their illnesses within a few years of the settlement. Each of them knew that their fight had mattered, that their willingness to speak out had changed something important. Today, the story of the Radium Girls is taught in courses on labor history, medical ethics, and occupational health. Their case is cited as a landmark in the development of worker protections. The legal principles established in their fight helped shape subsequent legislation, including laws that would eventually govern nuclear workers and others exposed to radiation in their jobs. In Ottawa, Illinois, where another group of dial painters faced similar conditions and similar illnesses, a memorial now stands in honor of these women. Their names are inscribed there, a reminder of what they endured and what they accomplished through their determination. The factory buildings where the dial painters worked are long gone. The towns have changed, grown, evolved. But the legacy of those young women endures in every workplace safety regulation, in every worker's right to know about hazards in their environment, in the fundamental principle that employers bear responsibility for protecting those who work for them. The Radium Girls did not set out to be activists or pioneers. They simply wanted good jobs, fair treatment, and the truth about what had been done to them. In seeking those basic things, they helped create protections that benefit workers to this day. As we reflect on this chapter of history, we might consider what these women would think of the world they helped create. A world where workers have rights they could not have imagined, where exposure to dangerous materials is monitored and regulated, where corporations can be held accountable for the health of their employees. It was not a quick or easy transformation. It took decades. It took suffering. It took ordinary people demanding to be heard. The glow of radium has long since faded from the consumer products that once celebrated it. But the light these women brought to questions of industrial justice, corporate responsibility, and workers' rights continues to illuminate our understanding of what we owe to one another in the workplace and beyond. Their story reminds us that progress often comes at great cost, and that the courage of a few can change the lives of many. Thank you for spending this time with us. We hope this journey through history has given you something to contemplate as you rest. Until next time, take care and sleep well. In the early decades of the 20th century, the plains of northeastern China stretched endlessly beneath wide skies. This region, known to the world as Manchuria, had long been a crossroads of empires and ambitions. Its fertile soil and strategic position made it valuable to many nations, but particularly to an expanding Japanese empire seeking resources and territory on the Asian mainland. What occurred here between 1937 and 1945 represents one of the most troubling chapters in the history of medical science and military research. It is a story that remained largely hidden from public knowledge for decades after the Second World War ended. The full scope of events only emerged gradually through declassified documents, survivor testimonies, and the patient work of historians piecing together fragments of a deliberately obscured past. Tonight, we examine the history of Unit 731, a covert biological and chemical warfare research program operated by the Imperial Japanese Army. We will trace its origins, understand the context that allowed it to exist, and consider its aftermath and lasting significance. This is difficult history, but it is important history. Understanding how such programs came to exist helps us recognize the conditions that enable institutional wrongdoing and why international agreements on medical ethics and warfare exist today. To understand how Unit 731 came into being, we must first understand Japan's position in the early 20th century. Following the Meiji Restoration of 1868, Japan had transformed itself from a feudal society into a modern industrial nation with remarkable speed. By the 1920s, it possessed a powerful military, a growing economy, and ambitions that extended across the Pacific and into mainland Asia. Military medicine had become increasingly sophisticated in all major powers during this period. The First World War had demonstrated both the devastating potential of chemical weapons and the importance of medical research for maintaining fighting forces. Nations around the world invested heavily in understanding infectious diseases, developing vaccines, and studying how to protect soldiers from biological threats. It was in this environment that a young army surgeon named Shiro Ishii began his career. Born in 1892 in Chiba Prefecture, Ishii showed exceptional academic ability from an early age. He studied medicine at Kyoto Imperial University, one of Japan's most prestigious institutions, and graduated in 1920. He joined the Imperial Japanese Army shortly thereafter and quickly distinguished himself as an ambitious and capable officer. Ishii became fascinated by the potential of biological agents in warfare. In the late 1920s, he traveled extensively throughout Europe and North America, ostensibly to study disease prevention methods. During these travels, he observed Western military research programs and became convinced that biological weapons represented a significant untapped advantage for Japan. Upon his return to Japan, Ishii began advocating for the establishment of a dedicated biological warfare research program. His arguments found receptive audiences among military leaders who saw Japan surrounded by larger, resource-rich powers. The nation lacked the industrial capacity to match Western powers in conventional arms production. Biological weapons, Ishii suggested, could be developed relatively cheaply and could prove decisive in future conflicts. In September 1931, Japan engineered an incident along the South Manchurian Railway as a pretext for military intervention. Within months, Japanese forces had occupied all of Manchuria and established the puppet state of Manchukuo. This territory, far from international observers and outside normal diplomatic oversight, would provide the isolated location Ishii needed. In 1932, Ishii received authorization to establish a small research facility near the city of Harbin. This initial installation, known as the Zhongma Fortress, was relatively modest in scale. It consisted of wooden buildings surrounded by high walls, officially designated as a water purification unit. The deceptive naming conventions that would characterize the program had already begun. Research at Zhongma focused initially on studying pathogens that might be weaponized: plague, cholera, anthrax, and typhoid among them. But the program faced a fundamental problem. Laboratory studies on bacteria and viruses could only reveal so much. To understand how these diseases actually affected human beings, to determine effective dosages and delivery methods, the researchers believed they needed human subjects. The isolated location and Japan's total control over Manchukuo meant there was no external oversight of what occurred within these facilities. Chinese prisoners, labeled as criminals or bandits by Japanese authorities, began to be transferred to Zhongma for what was described as medical examination. In reality, they became subjects of experimentation. The program's existence was known only to a small circle within the Japanese military establishment. Secrecy was maintained through compartmentalization, with different sections of the research program unaware of what others were doing. Personnel were sworn to absolute confidentiality. The penalties for disclosure were severe. In 1936, Emperor Hirohito signed a decree authorizing the expansion of Ishii's program. A massive new facility would be constructed near the village of Pingfang, approximately 20 kilometers south of Harbin. This complex would dwarf the original Zhongma installation in both size and capability. It would eventually employ over 3,000 personnel, including some of Japan's most accomplished scientists. Construction required the forced relocation of local Chinese villagers. Their homes were demolished to make way for what would become a sprawling industrial complex covering nearly 6 square kilometers. The facility included laboratories, dormitories, a power plant, animal breeding areas, and a prison block capable of holding hundreds of subjects at a time. The official designation for this new installation was the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department of the Kwantung Army. Internally, it was known simply as Unit 731. This bland administrative title concealed the true nature of the work conducted within its walls. The facility operated with the efficiency of a factory. Different divisions handled different aspects of research. Some focused on cultivating and producing pathogens in large quantities. Others studied delivery mechanisms, how diseases might be spread through water supplies, food contamination, or aerial dispersal. Still others conducted the experiments on human subjects that provided data on disease progression and mortality. The range of research conducted at Unit 731 was extensive. Scientists studied plague, cultivating the bacteria in vast quantities and developing methods to infect fleas that could then be released over target areas. Cholera and typhoid research focused on water contamination techniques. Anthrax, glanders, and other diseases were investigated for their potential military applications. But the research extended beyond infectious diseases. Studies were conducted on the effects of pressure, temperature extremes, and various other conditions on the human body. The goal was to understand human physiology under stress, ostensibly to help protect Japanese soldiers, but in practice, causing immense suffering to experimental subjects. A significant focus of Unit 731's work involved developing delivery systems for biological agents. Conventional explosive bombs would destroy most pathogens upon detonation. Researchers experimented with ceramic containers that would shatter on impact, releasing their contents without the heat and pressure that would kill bacteria. These devices were tested repeatedly, with researchers measuring how effectively they spread disease. Field trials were conducted outside the laboratory as well. Chinese villages and towns became testing grounds, with Unit 731 personnel releasing pathogens and then studying the resulting outbreaks among civilian populations. Wells were contaminated. Infected food was distributed. Aircraft released plague-carrying fleas over populated areas. The human cost of these activities is difficult to calculate with precision. Records were deliberately destroyed as the war ended. Estimates of those who died as direct experimental subjects within Unit 731's facilities range from 3,000 to 12,000 people. The number who died in field trials and deliberately caused epidemics is almost certainly far higher. The subjects were predominantly Chinese, both prisoners and civilians. But the facility also held Russians, Koreans, Mongolians, and some Allied prisoners of war. Within the unit, these people were referred to by the Japanese term maruta, meaning logs, a term that reflected their dehumanization in the eyes of their captors. They were regarded not as human beings, but as raw material for research. Understanding how educated scientists participated in such activities requires examining the institutional context in which they operated. Unit 731 recruited from Japan's top medical schools and research institutions. Young researchers were offered well-funded facilities, freedom from normal ethical constraints, and the opportunity to conduct studies that would be impossible elsewhere. They were told their work served the emperor and the nation. The culture within the unit normalized what would otherwise be unthinkable. New arrivals were gradually exposed to the nature of the work. Those who expressed doubts were reminded of their patriotic duty and the consequences of disloyalty. Over time, psychological mechanisms of denial and compartmentalization allowed participants to separate their professional work from its human consequences. Unit 731 was not an isolated aberration, but part of a larger network. Sister units operated throughout Japanese-occupied territory. Unit 100 near Changchun focused on biological weapons targeting livestock and crops. Unit 516 conducted chemical weapons research. Units in Nanjing, Beijing, Guangzhou, and Singapore carried out related programs. Together, these installations represented a substantial investment in unconventional warfare capabilities. The leadership of Unit 731 maintained close connections to the highest levels of Japanese government and military command. Ishii reported directly to the Army's top generals. Funding flowed through both military and civilian channels. Major Japanese pharmaceutical companies and research institutions provided supplies, equipment, and personnel. As war with China expanded following 1937, Unit 731's research moved toward operational deployment. Biological attacks were launched against Chinese cities, though distinguishing their effects from natural disease outbreaks proved difficult. The most ambitious plans, large-scale attacks on American forces in the Pacific, remained in development as the war progressed, but were never fully implemented. By 1945, Japan's military situation had become desperate. American forces advanced across the Pacific. Soviet entry into the war against Japan was imminent. The researchers at Unit 731 understood that their work must never fall into enemy hands, not only for strategic reasons, but because of what it would reveal about their activities. On August 9, 1945, Soviet forces launched a massive invasion of Manchuria. The speed of their advance caught Japanese forces off guard. At Unit 731, preparations for evacuation accelerated dramatically. Orders came to destroy all evidence of the facility's true purpose. Over the following days, workers demolished laboratories and burned documents. Prisoners still held within the facility were killed to eliminate witnesses. Buildings were blown up. Whatever could not be destroyed was buried. Staff evacuated by train and aircraft, carrying some research materials with them while leaving behind a scene of deliberate devastation. When Soviet forces reached Pingfang, they found only ruins. Local Chinese villagers had already begun scavenging the site for building materials. Much of the physical evidence had been destroyed, but the Soviets captured some Unit 731 personnel and, through interrogation, began to piece together what had occurred. In December 1949, the Soviet Union held a military tribunal in the city of Khabarovsk. 12 Japanese prisoners, including several Unit 731 officers, were tried for manufacturing and employing biological weapons. The defendants confessed to their participation in the program and provided detailed testimony about its operations. All were convicted and sentenced to labor camp terms ranging from 2 to 25 years. The Western response to Unit 731 took a very different form. American occupation authorities in Japan had quickly learned of the biological warfare program through their own interrogations. But rather than prosecuting those involved, they made a calculated decision. The research data accumulated by Unit 731, however it had been obtained, represented valuable scientific intelligence. The Cold War was beginning, and the United States wanted to deny this information to the Soviet Union. A secret agreement was reached. Ishii and other key Unit 731 figures would provide American investigators with complete access to their research findings. In exchange, they would receive immunity from war crimes prosecution. The deal was kept hidden from the American public, from Japan's other former enemies, and even from other branches of the US government. Ishii returned to civilian life in Japan. He lived quietly in Tokyo, reportedly establishing a medical clinic. Other Unit 731 veterans similarly resumed normal careers. Many rose to prominent positions in Japan's post-war medical and pharmaceutical industries. Some became university professors. Others led research institutions. Their wartime activities remained unmentioned and officially unknown. This silence persisted for decades. Japan's rapid transformation into an American ally during the Cold War discouraged investigation of wartime atrocities. The Japanese government's official position was that no evidence existed to confirm the allegations. Survivors who attempted to speak publicly found little audience. The first cracks in this wall of silence appeared in the 1980s. Japanese journalists and historians began conducting systematic research. Testimony from former Unit 731 personnel, now elderly and in some cases willing to speak before they died, provided first-hand accounts. Chinese researchers compiled evidence from survivors of field trials and experiments. American documents were gradually declassified under Freedom of Information requests. A 1981 book by journalist Seiji Morimura brought the subject to wide public attention in Japan for the first time. The documentary evidence he presented made denial increasingly difficult. Subsequent investigations added further detail to the historical record. Today, the site of Unit 731's main facility houses a museum and memorial. Visitors can see the remains of the original buildings, foundations, a few standing structures, and archaeological excavations that have uncovered additional evidence. The museum presents the history of the unit through photographs, documents, and testimony. Chinese survivors and their descendants have sought legal recognition and compensation through the Japanese courts. These cases have met with limited success. While some Japanese judges have acknowledged that Unit 731's activities occurred, they have generally declined to order compensation, citing legal technicalities related to treaties and statutes of limitations. The legacy of Unit 731 extends into contemporary discussions of research ethics and international law. The Nuremberg Code, established after World War II, set forth principles requiring voluntary consent for human experimentation. The later Geneva Conventions and Biological Weapons Convention of 1972 explicitly prohibit the development and use of biological weapons. These international frameworks exist in part because of what occurred in places like Pingfang. The terrible example of what happens when researchers operate without ethical constraints or oversight has informed how the international community approaches questions of human subjects, research and weapons development. The history of Unit 731 reminds us that scientific capability without ethical grounding can produce tremendous harm. The researchers who staffed these facilities were not aberrations or monsters. They were products of elite universities, trained in methods of inquiry that have brought genuine benefits to humanity when properly constrained. What made the difference was context, an authoritarian system, geographic isolation from oversight, an ideology that dehumanized certain groups, career incentives that rewarded participation, secrecy that prevented external accountability. These conditions, not inherent evil, enabled ordinary people to participate in extraordinary wrongdoing. Understanding this history is not comfortable, but it serves important purposes. It honors the memory of those who suffered. It helps explain why the ethical frameworks that govern research today exist. And it reminds us that vigilance is required to prevent such conditions from recurring. The plains of Manchuria are quiet now. The facilities have been reduced to ruins and memorials, but the lessons of what occurred there remain relevant. In laboratories around the world, researchers navigate complex ethical questions. The decisions they make every day are shaped, whether they know it or not, by the history that unfolded in this remote corner of northeastern China many decades ago. In the deep countryside of Macon County, Alabama, the land rolls gently beneath a wide southern sky. Cotton fields stretch toward the horizon, and small communities dot the landscape, places where families have lived and worked for generations. This is a region shaped by history, by the legacy of agriculture, by poverty, and by the complicated bonds between people and the institutions that claim to serve them. Tonight, we turn our attention to one of the most significant chapters in American medical history. It is a story that unfolded over 4 decades, largely in silence, in this quiet corner of the rural South. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study, as it came to be known, was a government research project that began in 1932 and continued until 1972. What started as a 6-month observation study became something far longer, far more consequential, and ultimately deeply troubling. This is not a story of villains twirling mustaches. It is in many ways more complicated than that. It is a story about how ordinary people, working within systems they believed in, made choices that caused profound harm. It is about trust, about race, about medicine, and about the slow, difficult process of reckoning with the past. Let us begin where all such stories must begin, with context. The early 20th century was a time of remarkable change in American medicine. The previous decades had witnessed transformations that seemed almost miraculous. Germ theory had revolutionized the understanding of disease. Antiseptic techniques had made surgery survivable. Public health campaigns were conquering illnesses that had plagued humanity for centuries. In this atmosphere of progress, medical researchers believed they stood on the threshold of understanding all human ailments. New laboratories opened at universities across the nation. Government agencies expanded their reach. The United States Public Health Service, founded in 1798 to care for merchant sailors, had grown into a powerful institution with a mandate to protect the health of all Americans. Yet this era of advancement contained contradictions that would prove deeply consequential. The same medical establishment that celebrated scientific progress also operated within a society structured by racial segregation. African Americans were largely excluded from medical schools, from hospitals, from the emerging benefits of modern healthcare. When they appeared in medical literature at all, it was often as subjects rather than practitioners, as problems to be studied rather than patients to be healed. There existed, among some physicians and researchers of this period, assumptions about racial difference that we now recognize as profoundly mistaken. Some believed that certain diseases manifested differently in black bodies than in white ones. Others suggested that African Americans possessed different susceptibilities, different resistances, different biological characteristics altogether. These beliefs were not fringe ideas held by a few. They were woven into medical textbooks, taught in prestigious institutions, and accepted by many who considered themselves enlightened. Syphilis occupied a particular place in the medical imagination of this era. The disease, caused by the bacterium Treponema pallidum, had been recognized for centuries. It progressed through distinct stages, an initial sore, then a rash, then a period of latency that could last for years or even decades. In its final stage, tertiary syphilis, the disease could attack the heart, the blood vessels, the brain. It caused suffering that was both physical and social, carrying a stigma that made it difficult to discuss openly. By the 1920s, treatments existed, though they were far from ideal. Compounds containing arsenic and bismuth could slow the disease's progression, but they were toxic, expensive, and required lengthy courses of treatment. Many patients, particularly those without resources, went untreated. The disease remained common, especially in impoverished communities with limited access to medical care. It was against this backdrop that the Public Health Service turned its attention to Macon County, Alabama. The county had been identified in earlier surveys as having exceptionally high rates of syphilis among its African American population. In 1929, a study funded by the Julius Rosenwald Fund, a philanthropic organization dedicated to supporting African American communities, had tested thousands of residents and found infection rates approaching 40% in some areas. The Rosenwald study had intended to demonstrate that syphilis in black communities could be treated effectively if resources were provided. It was designed in its way to challenge racist assumptions and advocate for equal medical care. But the Great Depression intervened. Funding dried up. The treatment program that was supposed to follow the testing never materialized. The Public Health Service saw an opportunity in this unfortunate timing. Here was a population with high rates of syphilis, largely untreated, in an isolated rural area. Here was a chance to study what they called the natural progression of the disease, to observe what happened when syphilis was allowed to run its course without intervention. The question they sought to answer seemed to them scientifically valid. Did syphilis manifest differently in African Americans than in whites? Earlier studies conducted in Oslo, Norway, had tracked the disease in white patients. Now researchers proposed they could conduct a parallel study with black subjects. The assumptions underlying this question were themselves problematic, but the manner in which the study would be conducted compounded the ethical failures many times over. The man who initiated the study was Dr. Taliaferro Clark, head of the Public Health Service's Venereal Disease Division. Clark envisioned a short-term project, perhaps 6 months, during which researchers would examine men in the late stages of syphilis, document their symptoms, and gather data. He did not intend for the study to last decades. He did not anticipate many of the decisions that would follow. But Clark made one crucial choice at the outset that would shape everything to come. The study would not be presented honestly to its subjects. The men would not be told they had syphilis. They would not be told they were part of a research project. Instead, they would be told they were receiving treatment for what local people called bad blood, a colloquial term that encompassed various ailments. In the autumn of 1932, researchers began enrolling subjects. They sought African American men who had syphilis in its latent stage, men who had been infected for years but showed no active symptoms. They found them through churches, through community organizations, through the network of connections that Dr. Eugene Dibble, the African American medical director of the Tuskegee Institute's hospital, helped facilitate. The Tuskegee Institute itself, now Tuskegee University, was one of the most respected black educational institutions in America. Founded by Booker T. Washington, it stood as a symbol of achievement and self-determination. Its involvement lent the study credibility in the local community. When representatives from Tuskegee encouraged participation, people trusted them. One figure would become central to the study's operation: Nurse Eunice Rivers. A black public health nurse born in Georgia, Rivers served as the study's primary point of contact with its subjects for nearly 4 decades. She drove them to their appointments, brought them food, helped their families. She became, in many ways, a trusted presence in their lives. Rivers' role remains complicated to assess. She operated within a system designed by others, following protocols she did not create. She believed, at least initially, that the men were receiving some form of care. Over time, the ethics of her position became increasingly difficult to evaluate. She was both an employee following orders and a community member facilitating harm to her neighbors. By 1933, the study had enrolled approximately 600 men. Roughly 400 had syphilis. 200 served as controls, having never been infected. The participants ranged in age from their 20s to their 60s. They were sharecroppers, laborers, farmers, men with little formal education, limited economic resources, and few alternatives. What did these men believe they were receiving? The answer tells us much about how the study operated. They were given free physical examinations, which were rare and valuable in an era when rural black Southerners had almost no access to health care. They were given free meals on examination days. They were given small payments for their time, and they were told they were being treated for bad blood. The treatments they received were placebos, aspirin, vitamins, tonics that did nothing to address their underlying disease. Periodically, they underwent painful spinal taps, a diagnostic procedure that researchers presented as a special treatment. A letter inviting subjects to return for this procedure read in part, "Last chance for special free treatment." The manipulation was deliberate and sustained. When Dr. Clark retired in 1933, he assumed the study would soon conclude, but his successors thought otherwise. Dr. Raymond Vonderlehr, who took over the project, saw an opportunity for more extensive research. What had been conceived as a 6-month study became, under his direction, an ongoing project with no clear end date. Years passed. The men lived their lives, working, raising families, growing older. Periodically, they returned for examinations. Periodically, they received their small payments and their free meals. The study continued through the Depression, through the New Deal, through changes in presidential administrations. And then came a development that would make the study's continuation not merely questionable, but indefensible. In the early 1940s, penicillin emerged as a revolutionary treatment for syphilis. The antibiotic, discovered by Alexander Fleming in 1928 and developed for clinical use during World War II, proved remarkably effective against Treponema pallidum. Where previous treatments had been toxic and unreliable, penicillin offered a genuine cure. By the late 1940s, it had become the standard treatment for syphilis throughout the United States. The researchers running the Tuskegee study faced a decision. They could provide their subjects with penicillin, curing them of the disease that the study existed to observe, or they could withhold treatment, preserving the conditions that made their research possible. They chose to withhold treatment. The decision was not passive. It required active intervention to ensure the men did not receive penicillin elsewhere. During World War II, when some study subjects were called up for military service, the researchers contacted the draft board to have them excluded, ensuring they would not receive treatment through the armed forces. When public health campaigns brought syphilis treatment to Macon County, the researchers worked to keep their subjects away from the clinics. The men of the Tuskegee study were not merely left untreated. They were deliberately prevented from accessing treatment that had become widely available. This distinction matters profoundly in understanding the nature of what occurred. The study continued through the 1950s. It continued through the 1960s. The researchers published papers documenting their findings. The medical community was aware of what was happening in Macon County. The study was discussed in medical journals, at conferences, in professional settings. Yet for decades, no one with the authority to stop it chose to do so. Various explanations have been offered for this collective silence. Some researchers believed, despite mounting evidence to the contrary, that the study retained scientific value. Others were simply following institutional procedures, deferring to those above them in the hierarchy. Still others may have accepted, consciously or not, the racist assumptions that had shaped the study from its inception. Meanwhile, the men who were its subjects continued to suffer. Syphilis, untreated, progressed through their bodies. Some developed cardiovascular complications. Some experienced neurological damage. Some died of causes directly attributable to the disease. Their wives contracted syphilis from them. Children were born with congenital infections. The harm radiated outward through families and generations. By the early 1970s, the study had been running for 4 decades. The original researchers had retired or died. New personnel had taken their places, inheriting a project whose origins receded ever further into the past. The study had become, in some ways, institutional furniture, something that had always been there, something that no one questioned. It would take an outsider to bring it to an end. Peter Buxton was a public health investigator working for the Public Health Service in San Francisco. In 1966, he learned of the Tuskegee study and was troubled by what he heard. He raised concerns through official channels, writing to his supervisors, questioning the ethics of what was being done. The response he received was dismissive. A committee convened to review the study concluded that it should continue. The scientific opportunity, they argued, was too valuable to abandon. They recommended following the subjects until all had died, at which point autopsies could provide final data on the disease's effects. Buxton did not accept this answer. For 6 years he continued to press his concerns, and when internal objections failed, he chose a different path. In 1972, Buxton contacted Jean Heller, a reporter with the Associated Press. He provided her with documentation about the study. Heller investigated, verified the facts, and on July 25, 1972, the story appeared on the front page of newspapers across the nation. The public reaction was immediate and intense. Congressional hearings were announced. The study was terminated. Senator Edward Kennedy convened a subcommittee that heard testimony from surviving subjects, from researchers, from public health officials. The nation was forced to confront what had been done in its name. What emerged from the hearings and investigations was a comprehensive portrait of failure. The men had never given informed consent. They had been actively deceived about their condition and their treatment. They had been denied access to medication that could have saved their lives. And all of this had occurred not in some rogue operation, but within the official structures of the United States government. Of the original subjects, approximately 128 had died of syphilis or its complications by the time the study ended. 40 wives had been infected. 19 children had been born with congenital syphilis. These numbers represent only the most direct and measurable harms. The fuller toll, psychological, familial, communal, cannot be easily quantified. In the aftermath of the exposure, lawsuits were filed on behalf of the survivors and the families of those who had died. In 1974, the government agreed to a settlement providing monetary compensation and medical care. The payments were modest. Survivors received approximately $40,000 each, but they represented at least a partial acknowledgement of wrongdoing. More significantly, the revelations prompted systematic reform. In 1974, Congress passed the National Research Act, establishing requirements for institutional review boards to oversee research involving human subjects. The Belmont Report, published in 1979, articulated ethical principles, respect for persons, beneficence, and justice that continue to guide medical research today. These reforms emerged directly from the Tuskegee study. The protections that now govern medical research, the consent forms that patients sign before participating in clinical trials, the review boards that evaluate research protocols, all of these trace their lineage, at least in part, to Macon County, Alabama. But legal settlements and regulatory reforms, however necessary, could not address the deeper wounds that the study had inflicted. For 25 years after the study's exposure, survivors and families waited for something more than compensation. They waited for acknowledgement. They waited for an apology. That apology came on May 16, 1997, when President Bill Clinton spoke in the East Room of the White House. 5 of the study's 8 surviving participants attended, along with family members and descendants. The president's words were direct. "What was done cannot be undone," he said. "But we can end the silence. We can stop turning our heads away. We can look at you in the eye and finally say, on behalf of the American people, what the United States government did was shameful, and I'm sorry." The men who attended that ceremony were in their 90s. They had lived their entire adult lives with the knowledge of what had been done to them. Or more precisely, they had lived the second half of their lives with that knowledge, since they had not known the truth during the decades the study was underway. Herman Shaw, 94 years old, responded on behalf of the survivors. "We are delighted today that the president of the country has apologized," he said. "We were treated unfairly, and it was wrong. In the years since the apology, efforts have been made to preserve the history and lessons of the study." The Tuskegee History Center, located near the Tuskegee University campus, documents the events and their context. Scholars have written extensively about the study, examining it from medical, historical, ethical, and sociological perspectives. The story has been taught in medical schools, nursing programs, and public health curricula throughout the country. Yet the study's consequences extend beyond what can be addressed through education or commemoration. Research has documented that African Americans display lower levels of trust in medical institutions and medical research than white Americans. This distrust has measurable effects on health outcomes, on willingness to participate in clinical trials, on interactions between patients and physicians. The roots of this distrust are complex, drawing on centuries of mistreatment that extend far beyond Tuskegee. But the study has become a symbol, a reference point, a name that encapsulates a history of betrayal. When public health officials encountered resistance to vaccination in Black communities during recent health crises, the word Tuskegee arose repeatedly in conversations. The past is not merely past. What then are we to make of this history as we consider it from the vantage point of the present? The Tuskegee study reminds us that institutions designed to help can also harm, that science conducted without ethics is not truly science, that the most vulnerable members of society require the strongest protections. It reminds us that terrible things can be done by people who do not consider themselves evil. that harm can arise from assumptions so deeply embedded that those who hold them cannot see them clearly. The researchers who designed and perpetuated the study did not, for the most part, believe they were doing wrong. They operated within frameworks of thought that made their actions seem reasonable, even necessary. This should give us pause. It should prompt us to examine our own frameworks, our own assumptions, our own blind spots. The last survivor of the Tuskegee study, Charlie Pollard, died in 2004. He was 93 years old. He had been enrolled in the study in 1932 when he was a young man, told he was receiving treatment for bad blood. He lived to see the study exposed, to receive compensation, to hear a presidential apology. But he did not live to see a world in which such things could not happen. We cannot claim that world yet. We can only work toward it, through vigilance, through honesty, through the commitment to seeing all people as equally deserving of care and respect. Tonight, as you rest, perhaps these reflections will settle gently into thought. The men of the Tuskegee study were fathers, sons, husbands, members of communities. They worked the land, they raised families, they trusted those who claimed to help them. Their lives and their suffering and their dignity deserve to be remembered. In the end, what we remember shapes what we become. The history of the Tuskegee study is difficult to hold, but it is necessary to carry. It belongs to all of us now, not as a source of guilt, but as a foundation for understanding. Not as an indictment of any one group, but as a reminder of what is possible when vigilance falters and humanity is forgotten. May those who suffered find rest. May those who remember find wisdom. And may the lessons of Macon County, Alabama, continue to guide us toward a more just and compassionate practice of medicine.